Welcome to the reading of the Sabbath School lesson for the second quarter of 2022. Welcome to Lesson 3 in the series on Genesis. It's titled Cain and His Legacy, ready for teaching on April 16, and my name's Percy Harrold. Thursday, April 14, The Wickedness of Man. Read Genesis chapter 4, verses 17 to 24. What was Cain's legacy, and how did Cain's crime open the way for the increasing wickedness of mankind? Genesis 4, beginning at verse 17. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And he built a city, and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begat Mehujael, and Mehujael begat Methuselah, and Methuselah begat Lamech. Then Lamech took for himself 2 wives. The name of one was Adah, and the name of the other Zillah. And Adah bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the harp and flute. And as for Zillah, she also bore Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Then Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice. Wives of Lamech, listen to my speech. For I have killed a man for wounding me, even a young man for hurting me. If Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, then Lamech 77-fold. Cain's great-grandson Lamech refers to Cain's crime in the context of his own. This comparison between the crime of Cain and the crime of Lamech is instructive. While Cain keeps silent about his only recorded crime, Lamech seems to be boasting about his, expressing it in a song in verses 23 and 24. While Cain asks for God's mercy, Lamech is not recorded as asking for it. While Cain is avenged 7 times by God, Lamech believes that he will be avenged 77 times, as it's said there in verse 24. If Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, then Lamech 77-fold. A hint that he's very much aware of his guilt. Also, Cain is monogamous, as we see in verse 17. Lamech introduces polygamy, for the scripture says specifically that he took for himself 2 wives in verse 19. This intensification and exaltation of evil will definitely affect the next generation of Cainites. Following immediately this episode of evil in the Cainite family, the biblical text records a new event that counters the Cainite trend. Adam knew his wife, Genesis 4:25, and that reads, And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, and named him Seth. For God has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. And the result is the birth of Seth, whose name is given by Eve to indicate that God had put another seed in the place of Abel. In fact, the history of the name Seth precedes Abel. The name Seth is derived from the Hebrew verb ashit, A-S-H-I-T, meaning I will put, as in Genesis 3:15. You'll remember that, where it reads, And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Which introduces the Messianic prophecy. The Messianic seed will be passed on in the Sethite line. The biblical text gives then the record of the Messianic line beginning with Seth, chapter 5, verse 3. And Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness after his image, and named him Seth, and included Enoch in Genesis 5 and verse 21. Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah, and ending with Noah in Genesis 6 and verse 8. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. The phrase sons of God, used in Genesis 6 verse 2, refers to the line of Seth because they are designed to preserve the image of God. Genesis 6 verse 2 reads that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And that refers us back to Genesis 5 verse 1. This is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. In verse 4, after he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he had sons and daughters. On the other hand, the daughters of men, in verse 2 of chapter 6, seems to have a negative connotation, contrasting the offspring of those in the image of God with those in the image of men. And it is under the influence of these daughters of men that the sons of God took wives for themselves of all whom they chose, as it read in Genesis 6 verse 2, indicating the wrong direction humanity was heading. And so, to finish the day, read Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 to 5. What a powerful testimony to the corruption of sin! Why must we do all that we can through God's power to eradicate sin from our lives? Genesis 6, verses 1 to 5. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also for afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind, and It Is Written. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. Remember, God is always faithful.